Today we are discussing three important topics such as Final Fantasy VII Remake's Part 2 release, Dark Deception, Monsters and Mortals to get Silent Hill crossover DLC, and I am explaining what is a open field game that was foretaken by one of the most anticipated games, Elden Ring, and how it differs from open world games. We are discussing its in-depth knowledge, technical details, and speculation of how the game will look like after release. So, before getting into the discussion topics, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and click the bell notification icon for more interesting and informative topics.
You know you're not just any little girl. You're a descendant of the ancients.
Now, our first topic is that the producer of Final Fantasy VII Remake talks about how he's looking forward to exceeding expectations with the release of Part 2. The producer wants the sequel to surpass fans' expectations. The release of Final Fantasy VII Remake in 2020 both delivered on fan expectations and subverted them. Square Enix was successfully able to capitalize on nostalgia for the original PlayStation JRPG, while also updating the game for modern audiences. That Square Enix also diverged from the original game's story was a twist many expected, but still took the game in a surprising direction. Now, Square Enix is looking to Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, and is hoping to recapture the magic again. This weekend, Square Enix has delivered the keynote for the ongoing CDEC and Kyushu 2020 online event. The keynote includes Final Fantasy VII Remake producer and Square Enix executive officer Yoshinori Kitase. Kitase spoke about Square Enix's plans for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, saying he hopes to once again exceed expectations while still surprising players. That's a challenge that seems both easier and more difficult to do than with the first game. Kitase describes how Final Fantasy VII players already know the story of the game, and because of this Square Enix was able to deliver what they expected while also making it more complex. As Kitase said, Square Enix wants to capitalize on making players think, oh, so this is what actually happened. However, this also allows Square Enix to surprise players and go beyond their expectations. In that, Kitase said that despite Final Fantasy VII being a remake, Square Enix can continue providing a game that fans can look forward to. It's easy to see why Square Enix would want to do this again with Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, since it worked so successfully with the first. It's also easy to see why it will be both easy and difficult in different ways. It'll be easy in that Square Enix has already diverged from the original story of Final Fantasy VII. Expectations are up in the air and everything going forward could be a major surprise, but it'll be difficult because new content can't rely as much on nostalgia. From here, Square Enix will have to find a new recipe balancing both the original Final Fantasy VII story and new content. Kitase can say he's excited to exceed expectations again, but Square Enix is in a more precarious position overall. No one knows what to think about Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2's direction. That said, Square Enix also has the benefit of momentum. Final Fantasy VII Remake has been a resounding success. When Square Enix officially announces Part 2 and reveals its characters once more in a new cinematic trailer, the hype will undoubtedly be back again, too. It doesn't guarantee Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 will be a great game, but there are worse conditions under which to launch a game. This is actually a treat for Final Fantasy fans and I am very looking forward for this game.
Huh? As who?
The first guy I ever loved.
Oh.
Wow. Your eyes.
And our next news topic is that multiplayer horror game, Dark Deception Monsters and Mortals is getting its second crossover DLC, calling in the denizens of Silent Hill. Is it actually the Silent Hill world or a different one? With fans of Silent Hill still doggedly waiting for a new game, multiplayer horror party game Dark Deception Monsters and Mortals has stepped in to try to fill the void. Developer Glowstick Entertainment recently released a tantalizing new trailer for their upcoming crossover DLC, arriving sometime in February 2021. The trailer is a simple affair. The words, "A new challenger approaches," fill the screen, with snippets from Silent Hill games past playing within the letters. Towards the end, a woman can be heard saying, "In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill." Those last two words fade in from the darkness, and that's it. It's not much, but the salient points are there. Dark Deception Monsters and Mortals is getting Silent Hill DLC. Anything more than that is speculation at this point, though. There are currently no details on which characters are planned for the crossover, or anything else. If it's anything like last December's Monstrum DLC, however, players will likely receive a new map showcasing a classic Silent Hill locale, along with a handful of new skins in both monster and mortal characters from the series. Who these characters will be is anyone's guess, but expect to see a selection from across the series. That would also put the upcoming Monsters and Mortals DLC in line with another recent bit of Silent Hill downloadable content, released last year for Behavior Interactive's Dead by Daylight. The asymmetrical multiplayer game celebrated its 4th anniversary with a healthy dose of Silent Hill content, including new cosmetics, a new Midwich Elementary School map, Silent Hill 3's Cheryl Mason is a brand new survivor and, naturally, the iconic Pyramid Head coming on board as a killer. Dark Deception, Monsters and Mortals released last year as a multiplayer spin-off of 2018's Dark Deception, a first-person horror maze game. In Monsters and Mortals, players take on the mantle of various characters from the Dark Deception universe, fighting to the death in mind-bending mazes. Since its initial release in November, the game has expanded its content to include the Monstrum universe and now looks set to bring Silent Hill fans into the fold with February's DLC. While fans of the game will likely be thrilled at the imminent crossover, it may prove small consolation for Silent Hill diehards who are waiting anxiously on a new game in the series. Even after series creator Kiichiro Toyama's departure from Sony, hopes for a new game have done anything but dissipate, with fans adamant that a new entry must be in the works. Until those hopes come to fruition, though, folks will have to make do with the licensed bonus content in games like Monsters and Mortals and Dead by Daylight, and maybe a replay of 2014's horror demo PT.
In my restless dreams, I see that town.
Now, getting into our hard topic. Elden Ring's open field concept. The upcoming Elden Ring has been described by its developer as an open field game, but what does this distinction mean in comparison to open world? From Software is reportedly implementing open field world design in Elden Ring, which could have a huge impact on its future games. One of the most highly anticipated releases that the public still knows next to nothing about is From Software and George R.R. Martin's Elden Ring. Gamers have been clamoring at every bit of information leaked or released by From about the title, but one of the most curious details about the upcoming game is director Hidetaka Miyazaki's claim that the game's world will be what he describes as open field. So what does open field mean? Essentially, it means that Elden Ring will be an open world game, in the loosest sense. From Software had initially described the game as an open world title, but have since pivoted away from using that terminology in favor of the open field descriptor, likely to differentiate the two concepts. According to Miyazaki, Elden Ring is set to be the studio's biggest title yet in terms of sheer volume, suggesting that the game's world will dwarf those of Bloodborne, Sekiro, and the Dark Souls series. However, the open field distinction intends to temper players' expectations about what this bigger world will entail. Gamers shouldn't prepare for a world-spanning odyssey on par with The Witcher 3 or Skyrim, but rather a contained, yet explorative gameplay experience. In essence, players should expect a world that's smaller and more intimate than something as enormous as an Assassin's Creed game, but still be different enough from past From Software games to avoid being seen as simply a more spread-out version of Dark Souls. Perhaps the best example of a game that utilizes an open field concept is Shadow of the Colossus. One of the most critically acclaimed PS2 games of all time, Shadow of the Colossus reveled in its unique setting of a desolate valley. Players would have to explore the valley, trekking through its beautiful vistas and locales in order to track down the game's 16 titular colossi. In using this format, Shadow managed to effectively break up the intense and bombastic Colossus battles with quiet periods of introspection and exploration. With Elden Ring being set in an open field as well, it's likely that From Software will use its spanning map to juxtapose the moments of tension and horror that the developer is famous for. From Software games have always been connected by the core theme of desolation, and Elden Ring's open field offers a new way to approach that central value as a spiritual sequel to the Dark Souls series. While Souls games evoked a sense of loneliness as the player descended into dark catacombs, further and further away from the safety of their last bonfire with every step, Elden Ring has the opportunity to evoke the same sense of isolation in the opposite way. Much like Shadow of the Colossus, riding one's horse through an open, barren, and ominous world is sure to communicate the game's grim tone in a much fresher way than Dark Souls did. Fans of Soulsborne-style games need not fret, however, as Miyazaki promises that the game's open field will not be a departure from the developer's roots, but rather an evolution of the world of Dark Souls. While titles like Dark Souls and Bloodborne did indeed feature a large world made up of various interconnected areas, Elden Ring promises to expand the claustrophobic corridors of past From Software games into larger, more open locales. Tight spaces will still be present in dungeons and caves, but these zones will be reached from the game's open field, rather than through doors and elevators connected to other dungeons and caves. Now, describing it briefly, we have to overview the game's history again. Almost 2 years after its announcement at E3 2019, From Software's upcoming Elden Ring is still nowhere to be seen. While various leaks, rumors, and reports have come out regarding the game, including one from Xbox's Phil Spencer himself, gameplay and story details are scarce. What little is known paints the picture of the biggest game From Software has worked on, but not big in the same way as its AAA contemporaries. From Software president Hidetaka Miyazaki once described Elden Ring as an open-field game, and that while it would be more sprawling than From Software's other titles, the company was distancing itself from true open-world terminology and design. Described as more akin to Shadow of the Colossus than The Witcher and Skyrim, this approach would blend From Software's famous level design with wide-open spaces, creating a patchwork of unique locales. The speculation of what this means for the game has been running rampant ever since. Defining the open field. Key to these speculations is the definition of what, exactly, an open field is, and where it has shown up before. If an open world is a world that the player can traverse in its entirety, typically consisting of a country or island-sized map, then an open field is a large field, or several connected fields, that players can traverse. This doesn't typically make for a particularly gameplay-rich experience, so open-field games tend to surround their fields with offshoot paths and dungeons for more linear, tightly designed gameplay to take place. This also has the side effect of making open-field games tend towards strict linear progression, as opposed to an open world's looser restrictions on the player's progress. With that in mind, it's not too hard to picture what Elden Ring could look like. Examples of open-field games date all the way back to The Legend of Zelda for the Nintendo Entertainment System. While players may be able to roam freely and find multiple dungeons or areas of interest, they'll only be able to progress through one or two of them at the start. In this way, developers can make players feel like they're exploring a wide, open world, while focusing most of their development resources towards bespoke locations that represent the highs of player engagement. Such design has been fairly common in the action-adventure genre over the years, with critically acclaimed games like Shadow of the Colossus, Okami, and even Darksiders 2 joining in on the trend. It looks like Elden Ring is the latest to pick this tried-and-true design method up, likely with its own twist though, and it has everything to gain from doing so. Open field can be better than open world. One of the primary benefits of going with an open field approach rather than open world is that From Software's development style can stay completely intact, with no visible effect on the final game. As an open-field action-adventure instead of a linear action RPG, Elden Ring will be able to properly build on the formula Dark Souls has pioneered. The sheer scope of an open world, combined with the necessity of most of its content being present on the world map, would instead necessitate that any content made for the game, with occasional exceptions, would need to be placed somewhere just to fill space. Also, open-world games have had something of a problem with repetitive collectibles and markers dotting the map. For all the right it did in its new genre, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild still needed to have slightly tweaked Korok puzzles all over Hyrule, just to fill its titanic space. And if a game with Nintendo's level of granular design and polish had to do it, one can only imagine how much the formerly annual Assassin's Creed franchise fill its worlds this way. That's not to say open world itself is bad, many fans obviously love it, but it would be harder to capture the signature Souls feel with it. For From Software's known approach to development, open fields that give plenty of chances to adhere to old design paths are the smarter option. The results of an open field. From Software is clearly interested in doing things a little differently with Elden Ring, and if this experiment is a success, there is an opening for many more open field style games in the future. While the Souls games aren't a stranger to large areas, they tend to just be on the road to progress. Elden Ring is posed to integrate them into a sprawling complex full of side paths and entrances to more linear locales, and with them, a wide variety of environments and enemies. Indeed, what enemies one can find in an open field and how they are fought may be much different than what Souls veterans are used to. Elden Ring's more open areas will alter combat by providing new opportunities for multi-enemy encounters, and more directions to flee from said enemies. Should Dark Souls 3's multiple swamps provide any further hints, larger enemies that persistently chase the player may become more prevalent. In addition, if Zelda and Shadow of the Colossus formula is adhered to closely enough, there could even be frequent chances for mounted combat and archery. A slightly more open world could mean infinitely more possibilities for From Software's Souls-like games, and Elden Ring seems to be the grand experiment where that is put to the test. If Elden Ring is received well, there could be a push for more hardcore 3D Metroidvania-like games with a more open concept. A number of fields, forests, ruined cities, and swamps peppered with linear Souls-esque levels sounds like a wonderful idea, and From Software is the best to pioneer it. This should breathe new life into the Souls-like genre, though fans are still waiting on Elden Ring's release date and more to manifest in 2021. So, we have done some breakdowns and speculation of an open field concept game. Especially, when it comes to a game like Elden Ring, it tends to give more thrust for the release end. That's all for the video. If you like the video, please subscribe to the channel for more updates. Like the video and share your thoughts in the comments, and until then, goodbye.
I doubt you could even imagine it. That which commanded the stars